Wilina mai ke alohi ka ʻāina ia kākou pakahia pau. Ua o ka mana mai ka lani ke kaua hoʻokahi ke alohi ka ʻāina aloha mai. I wanted to ground us in our mele and all the beauty that comes from our traditions, those beautiful reflections and poetry of place that speak to our deep ancestral connection to ʻāina as ancestor. And geez, I just feel like if everyone in the world could hear that, in spite of the war, in spite of the cheats, the lies, the demagogues, we should be able to ground ourselves in aloha ʻāina. And what a fantastic reminder from right there, folks. So we're going to clap again for them. Where I live, there are rainbows. Another famous song. Maybe we could get Robert here one day. Shining, glistening from the light that shines through the storm, making the dull and the gray, the uncertainty felt in the rumble of the thunder, the adverse and seemingly endless torrents metamorphosize, change into robust, radiant colors, lighting and signaling an end to the storm with the hope for a future that lies beyond. Rainbows reveal themselves in the shape of piʻo. The piʻo of the rainbows, the bowing, reaching, and inclusion, the bending and refraction of light through water to illuminate the truth, to make visible what is often unseen, the revelation of our eyes to witness color and hope where there once was merely gloom. The need to change Hawaii from what can feel like a perpetual state of crisis, from chasing one failed economic model to the other, and the possibilities of what lies beyond the storm are all relevant metaphors for the intentions of the Piʻo Summit. Our Piʻo Summit was established to highlight ancestral innovation and the need for courageous leadership to solve the complex problems of our times. The question really is, what can we see and do together? How can we effectively utilize the university's resources to support our community and real-world changes for our islands, to malama our place and our people, to create systems that bend and bow, to share abundance, and be like the light shining through water to illuminate the truth. So today we gather, this is our fourth Piʻo Summit, fifth year of working on this, with the theme of ʻāinahoʻi, land, law, and justice. It brings together community aloha ʻāina, organizers, land stewards, trustees, leaders, activists to explore the intersections of land, law, and justice at home and abroad. ʻāinahoʻi amplifies the collective movement for land back across the Pai'aina, showcasing the innovative ways communities are both navigating and challenging existing systems through legal frameworks, nonprofit land trusts, and grassroots organizing actions. The translations of ʻāinahoʻi remind us, ʻāina no hoʻi ke ia, it is indeed that which feeds us. It's not land. And both that land must return to community stewardship and trust, and that we must see land as ʻāina for a regenerative future. Our summit features a range of models and pathways towards land back, highlighting the many ways ʻāina is being restored, reclaimed, and protected. Our gathering focuses on highlighting micro and macro level approaches to ʻāinahoʻi, including restoring ea, strengthening relationships to ʻāina, and advancing self-determined governance rooted in ancestral innovation and courageousness. Please join me in sharing some recognition and mahalo to some important organizers and people involved in the Piʻo Summit this year. I want to start with Auntie Dana None Hall, whose fellowship created this opportunity for me as chair. So Auntie Dana, if you're streaming live. Where is he? Dean Osorio will be here at some point, so we'll say a mahalo to Dr. John Kamakaviva Ole Osorio, our dean at Hawaii Nuakea. Want to mahalo our Po'aike Aloha ʻāina team, incredible. We are the little lab that could, I think is our English translation. No permanent employees other than me, just fantastic GAs, some of the most committed amazing wahine that you'll find. And turns out all the lab is wahine. We had a kane for a while, but it didn't work out. So kane, we got to step up to the table, awamu a little bit more, respond to emails, be a little more timely. But how about a hand to our fantastic lab, Po'aike Aloha ʻāina. I want to mahalo my ohana, my wahine kili'i, all of our 5 keiki, and just for all the support and effort. Everything, that we try to do to advance Aloha ʻāina means at home sometimes got to sacrifice, and none of that is easy. And so it's about us together. So mahalo. Our sponsors, Malatu Hawaii Nui Akea, School of Hawaiian Knowledge, Kamehameha Schools. I saw some BJs a part of Kamehameha Schools. I saw Jason, Kaleo, others. Mahalo for the support today. Trustee, Goodyear. And so mahalo nui to Kamehameha Schools. I want to mahalo Ulupono for the support. Kahuliao, Director, Professor Sproat, Native Hawaiian Student Services, and really all of our panelists today that I'll get a chance to introduce. So I don't know why the heck I did this. I organized the conference, and somehow I'm going to give you guys what's supposed to be a 15-minute introduction to Hawaiian land tenure. I teach an entire semester class on this in the law school as well as at Kamakakua Kalani, so I had to cut out some of the, and it's so hard for me as a professor to cut out the details, but I'm giving you folks an overview, and it's important because it's going to introduce how we get to where we are today. How is it that Kanaka don't have access to our ancestral lands, crown and government lands? How is it that we have Aliʻi trusts, some of which are remnants from the mahele, from the ʻāina that came from our kupuna Aliʻi ancestors that are being challenged by outsiders, according to the American Constitution that didn't exist when these trusts were created. How is it that we now have community nonprofits all across Hawaii fighting to get lands back, to keep people in housing because of the vast socioeconomic inequalities and the rise of the 1%, here at home? And then how is it that we have incredible warriors and activists that are willing to stand against the most powerful military and economic force that has existed on issues like Red Hill, Pohakuloa, the nation of Hawaii, Brother Brandon is here, and others. And so I'm going to frame some of that sort of through a historical lens of how we got to where we are with ʻāina. If there's some white, I don't want to start hacking on you guys, sorry. My throat's getting dry. So this is our lab and our work, and if you want to come check it out, you can kind of learn some more. Thank you, baby. I was on the news since 5 a.m., so it's been a long morning already. But I'm going to jump right into it. So here we go. The impossible mission, Hawaiian land tenure in about 15 minutes. So we start from Kalai ʻāina. Over the generations of our kupuna engaging with Hawaii in this place, seeing Wakea as Sky Father, Papa as Earth Mother, Haloa that we all descend from, we developed really a customary relationship with ʻāina that defined kuleana of generally these 3 classes of people that we considered at that time. Our mo'i, right, our ali'i, the chiefs around the mo'i, and the makainana. They had different sets of rights. Makainana could go mauku to makai, could basically gather what they needed to survive within their ahupua'a. Ali'i divvied out certain parts of ahupua'a amongst themselves, and the mo'i was accountable to everything. So ancestrally, we had these relationships with ʻāina. They weren't all the same, okay? And when the system was fully functioning, this is when the ancestral circular economy was banging. These things were working together, kalai ʻāina, makahiki, all to create, a state of waiwai, water, wealth. That's what we're seeking, to be like the water flows from Mauka to Makai, to provide nutrients to our people and resources. Our kupuna, set this system up in such amazing ways. And of course, we know different population estimates. It's not super important, but we lost a huge amount of people. If we take standards account, from roughly 800,000, by the time the Constitution of 1840 was created, we had lost, 2/3 of our people. Huge, tremendous losses. And so what happens when you have that ancestral system that relies on kanaka, our relationships to place, that has makainana, that understand the seasonalities of spawning cycles of fishes from all across Hawaii, that knows the relationships with mauka and when pua are flowering and birds are gathering, and when we lose our people, we lose some of that ability to function in that system. And so the Aliʻi were trying to deal with that. As deep and difficult the crisis that we live in today, where it feels like it's endless war and I would say ludicrousy in some ways in leadership, at least we're not losing 2/3 of our people, And so our Aliʻi had to adapt to that. And what they did early on in sort of the largest bodies of law is they recognized those three classes that I mentioned, the mo'i, the Aliʻi, and the makainana, really in this first large-scale bodies of laws called the Kumukanawai and Nakanawai of 1839. That then later gets kind of refined and solidified in the 1840 Kumukanawai. And I'm going to read you guys an important section from that. Where it says Makolel Hawaii e noho ana ia ka noho ana o nā aliʻi me ka hoʻopono ana I ka ʻāina o Kamehameha ekahi oia ke poʻo ki aupuni. Kamehameha is the head of this aupuni. A nonono na ʻāina a pau mai Hawaii a Niʻihau. So to him belong all the lands from Hawaii to Niʻihau. But this is the important part. A ole naʻe no na pono'i. But in truth, wasn't just his. It wasn't solely his. No na kanaka a me na aliʻi. It also belonged to the people and to the chiefs in common. So this is a really, really important part of our Kumukanawai, and what it basically does is it formally establishes these constitutionally vested rights of three classes in the dominium, which is the entire territory of the nation state at that time, ko Hawaii pai ʻāina. Just like that Kalai ʻāina system did. So we're saying these three classes continue to be embedded kind of in this, with distinct rights in this land system. So after the Constitution of 1840, imagine, if you will, for, over that 4 million terrestrial acres, it's kind of like you have these three classes embedded in them. And so it's these three classes share these undivided interests in the dominium, in the territoriality of the Hawaiian Kingdom. So let's try to look at it. I think about it like a layered cake. Okay. One layer is the mo'i, one layer is the ali'i, and one layer is the makainana. They all have undefined, distinct, different interests in all of Hawaii ko pai ʻāina. So it's like if you took a slice out of any piece of ʻāina, you'd have those three layers of cake. So think about it not like a pizza that you could just cut up thirds, right? Think about it like a layered cake where you'd have each of those interests in each piece, no matter which one you cut out. So by 1847, they start trying to figure out what can they do with these three classes and how do they distinguish whose is what's. So in Privy Council, basically, they assemble and say that the present undivided rights and lands will be divided and distinctly defined. And they go about kind of doing that in the mahele. So the goal of the mahele itself is to divide out these two distinct interests. The mo'i, which is sort of synonymous with the government, as we'll see, and the ali'i, and the chiefs around them, okay? And this is really the big institution of how to create land, the origins of land titles in Hawaii. And so they do that through, I'm going to show you an example of the konehiki lands, so the lands that go to an ali'i. They do that in the Buke Kakaupaa, and we call it the Mahele book. I haven't taught Aloha ʻāina land tenure in a bit, but I used to take my students in the back room in the archives, and we look at this book. And the first time I saw it, I imagined it would be this giant, huge book. It's actually like this big. And you can read, it's S.P. Kalama's handwriting, and I think Keane probably went with me when I taught my law school class way back then, and Kavelau. So it's amazing that this is all in there. And on one side of the book, they say Ko Kamehameha Ekolu. So these are the lands that the Aliʻi had at that particular time, and they go back to the Mo'i. And then on the right side of the book are the different Aliʻi that are getting those lands as a result of the mahele. They go through a land commission process, and then eventually, if they want to get fee simple title, they get a palapala sila nui, which is a fee simple title on their ʻāina. But I want to show you guys something. Even that fee simple title, you see at the bottom, the very bottom line, it actually says koinaʻe ke kuleana o na kanaka maloko, reserving the rights of the kanaka. Okay, so that's important. And then eventually it gets signed off by an ali'i, someone of authority that awards out, these lands. And so this is the process that creates what we call konhiki lands. So konhiki lands, actually Victoria Kamamalu, I'll show you an example. All these konhiki lands end up becoming, parts of them are the remnants of the Ali'i Trust today, okay, that get inherited over time, that the origin kind of starts here. And then also in the mahele, they create the government and the crown lands. So it's near the end of the mahele process, later pages of the book. And on the left side, it says Ko Kamehameha Kolu. These are all the lands that go to Kauikeoli, Kamehameha III. And then on the right side, it says Ko Keaupuni. And so the government, Hawaiian Kingdom government lands then are created through this process. It's amazing. It's only by ancestral palena. It's by name and moku and ahupua alone. But the Ali'i understood where these places were, and they begin to kind of divvy this out. So after the mahele, what happens is the mahele tries to remove, and does, the mo'i and the ali'i out of that layered cake. So we no longer have whatever guava chiffon and haupia chocolate. We only have whatever it is at the bottom, mango something. I like mango, so we're going to keep the mango there. And the mango is the makainana layer, okay? So that one doesn't get removed. And so roughly out of that 4 million acres. Oh, hello. Sorry, I'm in Piʻo Summit, guys. Excuse me. Please turn off your phones if you have a chance. So out of that land base, roughly 1.5 million go to the Ali'i. These are called Konehiki Awards, and I'll show you how those originate into the Ali'i Trust. And then about 2.5 million go directly to Kauikeoli, and then he at the end creates what he keeps for himself that become the crown lands, and then what become the government lands. Okay. Really, really fascinating and amazing. So just a quick summary. I never learned in elementary or grade school, it wasn't until I was in my late 20s, that we had a constitution in Hawaii that said that we own all the land. It actually, Kauikeoli folks are trying to set it up so that in perpetuity, Kanaka would have access to this ʻāina. Because customarily, from the time of Kalai ʻāina, you can't separate Kanaka from ʻāina. Ali'i didn't have the ability to banish you from Hawaii forever. Never heard of mo'olelo like that, sending you off to Kahiki or something. No, that everybody had rights to ʻāina, and that was ancestrally understood and then codified through this process. So, then we run into something, that we're still dealing with in many ways, overthrow. Overthrow fundamentally changes everything. We talked about Oni versus Meek last night in a dinner, and Oni versus Meek, which is a case that tries to sever makainana rights to ʻāina, actually gets finally adjudicated after the overthrow. In the beginning, makainana win in the Hawaiian Kingdom, and so there's all of these pivotal court cases that actually try to diminish our rights to ʻāina that actually come after the overthrow in some ways. And so we're going to follow that makainana connection to our government ʻāina and government and crown lands. So if you look at that land base, roughly 2.5 million acres at one point, those lands get seized by the provisional government, after the illegal overthrow, eventually transferred to the federal government after the joint resolution that annexed Hawaii apparently, and then that land base then gets transferred to the state Hawaii during statehood through that process. And so there's all of these interesting transactions that happen over time. I'm not going to get into all of them because this is a brief overview, but as an example, about 2 weeks after the overthrow, the first sale of Hawaiian Kingdom government land that was done by the usurpers, this is how they did it. Can you guys take a look? You noticed anything unusual? Yes, things crossed out. So at the very top, they just cross out Liliuokalani's name. They write Sanford Dole. Instead of Queen on the second page, right? They just cross it out, write President. Again, cross out Liliu's name again, just write Sanford Dole. About 2 weeks after the overthrow, there's roughly 3,000 transactions that in this time period that transfer land kind of in this fashion. So whatever. In my 20s, it was really hard to own a car. I was delivering pizzas. I was just barely getting by, and I always had to go register my car and my title and things, and you got to get it notarized. And so I just look at this and I wonder, if I couldn't register my car with effective title, how is lands being sold when they're just crossing people's names out? Go take that to the DMV, get it notarized, see if it works, right? I mean, it shows you the historical injustice that we're all embedded in. None of us created this, but we're living through it in some capacity. And then there's also these large land swaps. Another example, 48,000 acres of crown land on Lanai were swapped that eventually now enable billionaire class to own most of Lanai. But originally that would have been crown land that was inalienable and shouldn't have been sold. So there's all of these kind of deals during the territory where lands are being swapped and moved over, and eventually lessening our land base. And so if we go to the right of that diagram and we look at the Aliʻi lands, right? So I just covered the crown and government lands, sort of what happened to them over time, leading up roughly to statehood. And there's a whole bunch of them sold off into statehood. And then if we look at the Aliʻi side, this is an example of an Aliʻi getting land in Bukemahele. Victoria Kamamalu, got actually the most ʻāina of anyone in the Mahele. And eventually, the lands that she has become foundational to what Pauahi eventually gets. So Kamehameha, I think Uncle Neil's team and Ulalia and others kind of led this map that shows this genealogy of these ʻāina being transferred over time by various Aliʻi to eventually when Pauahi holds it. So what I want everyone to understand is that the land base of these Aliʻi trusts was created in the Mahele. You don't get Aliʻi trusts without Mahele. And so when we look at the Aliʻi Trust then today, and we look at their missions and their vision, Kamehameha established in 1887, Queens, 1859, Lunalilo Trust, 1883, Lili'u Trust after Lili'u passes away in 1909. And then, I included Hawaiian Homes and OHA, which, Hawaiian Homes is derived off of a portion of the Crown lands as its land base. And we know OHA, a part of that transfer of land from the territory to the state, we call them the 5F trust lands, and OHA is supposed to benefit from 20% of the revenues, right? So not quite Aliʻi Trust, but connected to these ʻāina, connected to this place. And so, with that in mind, our graph doesn't only go down. We get out of the 1840s and 50s and 1890s, and our population is rising. Our people are rising. We're arguably becoming as educated as we were at one point in the kingdom. We have amazing youth that learn and speak their voices in truth to power. And what does the future then hold for us with ʻāinahoʻi and with these various initiatives that we'll be looking at today? So without further ado, and I think I almost did that on time, we're going to get into our panel one. So if I can, where's Sheldon at? Sorry, we just got to change the nature of the stage real quick. Oh, see, I could have slowed down on my presentation, but sorry, guys. We'll go switch to the chairs now. Yeah. So I'll maybe what I'll do is introduce our panelists and call you folks up, and then when the chairs kind of up here, you guys can come join me. So our panel one is Aliʻi Trust and Land Legacy. I'm going to introduce our panelists first. So, Dr. Noelani Goodyear-Kaʻōpua was born and raised in Oahu. Noelani has dedicated her career to Hawaiian education, grounding students in ʻāina and community while preparing students to succeed at the highest levels of academia. And Noelani is a professor of political science, recognized with the University of Hawaii Board of Regents Medal for Excellence in Teaching. She serves on many boards at the Kanehunamoku Voyaging Academy, Ma'o Organic Farms, Waianae Community Redevelopment Corporation, and the Kamehameha Schools. As a kahu waiwai, she and her colleagues work to ensure that Keali'i Pauahi's trust thrives in perpetuity and that the organization maintains a course towards the vision of a thriving and self-determined lāhui. Lāhui Hawaii. Professor Goodyear-Kaʻōpua's research has focused on Hawaiian social movements and the politics of Indigenous education. How about a hand for Noi Goodyear-Kaʻōpua? Our second panelist is Cully Watson. Cully was appointed chairman of the Hawaiian Homes Commission by Governor Josh Green and confirmed by the Senate on March 23, 2023. He previously served as chairman from 1995 to 1998 under Governor Cayetano, where he was responsible for coordinating the development of over 3,100 residential lots on Hawaiian Homes lands and implementing the $600 million state settlement, including the transfer of 16,518 of acres of state lands to make the trust whole. He was also instrumental in the passage and transfer of over 900 acres of federal lands into the trust under the Hawaiian Homes Recovery Act of 1995. As the president and CEO of the Native Hawaiian nonprofit Hawaiian Community Development Board, he worked with Nanakuli Hawaiian Homesteads. He worked association and oversaw the development of the Nanakuli Village Center, which includes a commercial center, several medical clinics, and the Kalani Ho'okaha Kope, or COP maybe, Hawaiian Cultural Learning Center, and a 48-unit Hale Makana o Nanakuli affordable housing project. Over the last 10 years, to expand HCDB's reach into the private and non-homesteading areas, Cully established successful HCDB partnerships with various private developers of low-income housing tax credit projects, primarily located on Oahu, Maui, and Kauai. How about a hand for Cully Watson? And our last panelist is Aliʻi Kahele, was elected trustee of Hawaii Island in 2024 and elected OHA board chairman the same year. Trustee Kahele is originally from Miloli'i, South Kona. He's a graduate of Hilo High and earned a bachelor's degree in education from UH Manoa while playing on the UH Rainbow Warriors men's volleyball team. He also has a master's degree in strategic studies from the U.S. Army War College. Kahele is a combat veteran, pilot, and a commissioned officer in the Hawaiian Air National Guard, the U.S. Air Force. He is also a commercial pilot for Hawaiian Airlines. In 2016, Governor David Ige appointed him to the Hawaii State Senate for District 1, following the unexpected passing of his father, the late Senator Gil Kahele. During his tenure as a state senator, Kahele served as the majority whip, majority floor leader, and chair for the committees on higher education and water and land. In 2020, he was elected to represent Hawaii's 2nd congressional district, in Washington, D.C. on the 117th Congress. How about a hand for Kai Kahele? And I'll introduce our moderator and where's Uncle Neil? Okay, in the corner. Last night we had a dinner at Uncle Neil's house, and we're talking about how do we, Kale, his son, is a great data man and databaser, and he's saying, how do we archive these stories of these tremendous leaders in our community and people of Uncle Neil's status and generation? And it opened up a fruitful conversation. And I just want to start by saying, Uncle Neil, I will remember your stories. Uncle Neil is a great mentor and has been through so much for our people, always leading with aloha. And I just want to honor that for him. So Uncle Neil launched Ho'okele Strategies, LLC, to engage inspiring wayfinders in a building and thriving society by adopting a holistic view of wealth. He had a 41-year career with Kamehameha Schools, where he managed over 350,000 acres of agriculture and conservation lands, and founded the First Nation Futures Program and Hawaii Investment Ready. Uncle Neil graduated from Kamehameha Schools and earned a BA and MA degree from Stanford University, where he was named to the Multicultural Hall of Fame. His community service includes Mauna Kea Stewardship and Oversight Authority, Hawaii Commission on Water Resource Management, Polynesian Voyaging Society, Hawaii Land Trust, Aloha Kumo ʻāina, Hawaii Investment Ready, Auaiaulu, Nakupa o Kuhio, and Johnson Ohana Foundation. So how about a hand for Uncle Neil and all our panelists? Please come join us. Maybe put Uncle Neil on the far side.
Yeah. Far side, okay. Okay.
Oh, mahalo kamana for that generous introduction, and yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Great to see. I'm gonna peek around this corner to see you guys. Great to have Rai start us off too. I remember Puvalu conferences hosted by Alulike. Anybody remember those back in the 70s when Walter and George used to come and start us off talking about the need to recover, stop the bombing on Koho'olawe. And it seemed like we were trying to remember a culture at that time and resist some of the things that were happening in our society. And what I see today, when I see the next generation, Rai coming up singing, I see the signs of resilience and I see the signs of restoration. That those things that we were trying to, it's not about just resisting, it's about rebuilding. And what marvelous legacies we have. Come on, and thank you for that. I like your slide deck. I want to get a copy of that, that intellectual property. But what marvelous legacies our kupuna left us, our Aliʻi in particular. And I was at a PVS thing with some people from Tahiti. And they just come from Bishop Museum and Kamehameha campus. And I said, you guys, you're lucky you had the Aliʻi you had. Not every place had Aliʻi who took care of their people the way ours did. So, and we have here people who are carrying on that legacy, and even with state agencies looking at the Crown and government lands and trying to get those back as well. So we promised this esteemed panel that they'd have an opportunity to kind of, they don't know what I'm going to ask them, but they have things to say. So we said, let's give you an opening statement opportunity to just kind of get some things on the table. I'm going to have to be the bad guy a little bit to keep things moving. So if we can make that a couple minutes, then we can kind of get to some of the questions that we have. So we'll start with our beautiful young lady here, Noe Goodyear-Kaʻōpua, and our trustee of Kamehameha Schools. Noe, you want to start us off?
Aloha mai kākou, aloha e nā kupuna, e kuʻumaukumu, aloha e nā kiaʻi ʻāina, aloha nui kākou. It's wonderful to be here with you all in a space filled with people who understand that ʻāina is not property. ʻāina is a set of relationships that connects all of us. And I'll start off by just sharing a few things kind of formal things about what's going on at Kamehameha and maybe a couple of things that are going on in my head. So one of the things is that on the formal side, Kamehameha has recently released our Strategic Plan 2030, and there's 3 things that I want to highlight that I'm really excited about and proud of. One is that we have refreshed the missions. It's not a different mission, but what it clarifies is that Pauahi had a vision to empower Native Hawaiians through education. And so we've restated, that in very clear terms. For the very first time in our vision and theory of change statements, we include that we're not just driving toward a thriving lāhui, but a thriving and self-determined lāhui, and that we understand that to get there, we need to be working with communities to regenerate ʻāina. So those things are very clearly called out, and I know it may seem like, oh, those are just words on paper, but these kinds of functional statements in a large, complex organization like Kamehameha really drive a lot of what happens and what the board and executive team look at. So that's sort of on the formal side, just what I want to highlight, and can get into what some of the examples of that look like, things that I think are really exciting. A couple things that I want to also put on the table as far as, cultural guidance. When I first was appointed to the board about four years ago now, it seemed like such a huge kuleana, and it is a very huge kuleana. And so I walked through Bishop Museum to connect with the kupuna in that space. And the mea kupuna that really called to me was this massive umeke of Ke'elikolanīs. And I don't know if any of you have been there and seen it, but we have an umeke in our ohana that was passed down through 7 generations, and it's so very precious to us to know that our kupuna 7 generations ago created this. So then to go there and see an umeke that's like literally this big, you can't wrap your arms around it, and to know that there were multiple umeke like this that Ke'elikolani filled to make sure that her people were fed, that was a very potent image for me to understand what is the kuleana of Kamehameha. A majority of the lands that Kamehameha now holds in its endowments came through the stewardship of Ke'elikolani. And this year is her 200th birthday, so it's a very opportune time to bring her mana back into the space of thinking about how we hold and defend ʻāina and feed our people with ʻāina. And then the other 2 quick ideas that I want to put on the table are the mana'o of ʻāina kaumaha. I'm sorry, Jason had to leave, but Jason Jeremiah, Natalie Kurashima, Namaka Whitehead, and others published an article about ʻāina kaumaha, that this is a way to think about the kuleana that we carry as stewards of ʻāina. We can get into that if folks are interested. And then the last thing I'm thinking a lot about on the drive over as I'm listening to, impacts of war, is that idea of ʻōpua aliʻi, which many of us have talked a lot about in our communities as in terms of the generosity. But I was thinking about it on the drive over also as the capacity to really hold both the grief and trauma, as well as the joy, the possibility, the hope and inspiration, and that we as collectively, as leaders who are trying to ʻāinahoʻi or hoʻi ʻāina, need to be able to have the capacity to hold the harms that have come with dispossession, the ongoing traumas and grief, as well as at the same time the tremendous inspiration and hope that we see enacted in our communities every day from folks who are restoring relationships with ʻāina. Mahalo.
Mahalo, mahalo. We're anxious to get into many of those topics. Kali, you want to take an opportunity to provide some opening statement?
Yeah, aloha mai kako. First of all, I'd like to thank Kamana Beamer, as well as Neil, as well as those that put this event together. It's really exciting to look out into the audience and see, especially young people. A lot of people I hang out with are old guys, and I'm getting kind of tired of that. I like to see the new guys coming in and taking the leadership roles, but really it is important that you learn. I was fortunate, I went to law school here at UH, based on the vision of C.J. Richardson that realized, hey, the law school is very, very key structurally, as well as just turning over the situation with the lawyers here in Hawaii. And so today, if you look around, a lot of the law firms are made up, in fact, in the majority of cases, of graduates of the UH Richardson Law School. And so I can see the value of that, but I also wanted to talk about the program. You know, our program historically is not done well. It was created over 100 years ago, and you know, it was done at a time where our race was vanishing. Prince Kuhio recognized that, so he lobbied, he got it through. But we were really shortchanged. You know, not only, you know, the individuals that were putting together and deciding what lands to allocate to the program. I mean, they had an ulterior motive. You know, during that time when the kingdom was overthrown and the territory was eventually set up, you had the Organic Act, and in that there was an amendment which allowed homesteading. And so in order to protect that, as well as retain the ownership and control of government lands, many of the ranchers, as well as the cultivated plantation areas, were lobbying for the passage of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. So they excluded all those good lands. And as a result of that, we, you know, if you go to Waimanalo, you look up at the cliffs, all the pali, that's Hawaiian homelands. You go to the Big Island, you see the lava, when not even the goats want to live, that's Hawaiian homelands. So we're changing that. It's been exciting. What's really been historic is the recent passage in 2022, Act 279, which allocated about $600 million for our program. We have leveraged that, and so now we have 28 projects across the state that we're moving forward with. And so it's an exciting time, but I also look forward in talking about, later in this discussion, about the working together with the Aliʻi Trust. We got some exciting things going on right now, and partly because of the leadership that we have on the table, and it's exciting times. I look forward to also talking about that. Thank you.
Mahalo, Kali. Kai, you want to wrap up?
Sure. Thanks, Neil, and aloha, kakahiaka, kako to everyone. You know, it's exciting to see all the students in the audience. And if you're a student, can you raise your hand? If you're a student at Kamehameha, in high school, in college, raise your hand high. You should raise your hand proud that you're a student. And so it's great to see all the students that are here today, and I would be remiss if I didn't. Man, you know, I was walking around this campus 30 years ago. And 30 years ago today, I would be getting ready to play Pepperdine in a men's volleyball match that's being played tonight. And I never would have thought that I would be the chairperson of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs 30 years later. I never even walked into this room when I was a student here at UH Manoa. So mahalo, Kamana, for putting on this Piʻo Summit and for bringing all of us together, and most importantly, for bringing all these keiki and haumana here, because it's really important. You know, to Kali's point, we're at the stage in our lives where we are leading these really important organizations and institutions, but our sun is on its setting, and at some point we are going to have to hand off the kuleana and the pilina to the next generation, and that next generation is you. And so 30 years will go by in an instant, and one day you will be sitting up here as the chairperson of the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, as the chairperson of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and Kale and I don't know where we'll be, but we will be enjoying ourselves someplace. OHA, I can't tell you how many times I have to talk to people who are confused at what the Office of Hawaiian Affairs is and what the Department of Hawaiian Homelands is. You know, OHA came to be at this unique time in our state's history. And there's certain people, I see John Osorio here and Lily Kala, and they lived in that moment. I was, you know, 5, 6 years old in the mid-1970s when Hokulea was sailing to Tahiti, when visionaries were crossing the channel between Maui and Kaho'olawe to stop the bombing there. The Office of Hawaiian Affairs was born out of that movement almost 48 years ago in 1978, and it was created for a couple really distinct reasons, one of which would be the betterment of the conditions of Native Hawaiians, but most importantly, it was created because the state of Hawaii had failed in its fiduciary and trust obligation since 1959 to address one of the provisions in the 5F public trust purposes that Kamana talked about. The Office of Hawaiian Affairs was the state's answer to fulfilling its responsibilities and the kuleana given to it by the United States of America in the Admissions Act. And OHA has existed since the people of Hawaii ratified it in 1978. It was several laws were then enacted in 1979 and 1980, but OHA is the only entity in this state that has constitutional power, Article 7 of the state's constitution, that is an independent branch of government in Hawaii, co-equal to the legislative, executive, and judicial branches, something you will not find anywhere else in the United States, specifically to serve the indigenous people of Hawaii, both Native Hawaiians as defined in the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act and all Native Hawaiians. And that's really important. And so, you know, for me, it's an honor to chair the Office of Hawaiian Affairs and serve along with the 8 other trustees at OHA. And looking forward to diving into some of the questions that Neil has. But thanks for having me, and thank you, Kamana, for putting this on. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Kai. You've each given us some juicy items that we want to kind of munch on a little bit. And I want to begin with our, I guess it's my 40 years experience at Kamehameha, but with our Aliʻi legacies. And Kali and Kai, feel free to jump in on that as well, but I guess we'll start with you, Noe. You know, each of these legacies that Kamana had that wonderful slide, land-based. Was it just because land was a great investment and they saw this as going up, or was there some pilina that they wanted, that our Aliʻi wanted to kind of sustain through the administration of these lands? And so, can you speak to that, and how are we managing those lands, and how have we managed these lands to realize that kind of cultural connection?
Yeah, mahalo. Well, that idea of opu ali'i that I was speaking of earlier, I think connects to the question of, as far as the founders of the Ali'i trusts, you know, where we looked at Kamana's slide of population decline. Pauahi's life, from her birth to death, was like half the population was lost, right? The population was halved in that time. So I think the model that our Ali'i of that time gave us is that they saw and could hold the deep pain and loss that was going on, but they also saw that what was our greatest source of waiwai was our ʻāina and the connection of our ʻāina and our people. And when you look at the institutions that were founded, you know, Liliʻuokalani Trust, Lunalilo Trust, Pauahi's Trust, they're all institutions of care. They're life-affirming institutions. They're institutions that show us that whether it's orphan and indigent keiki, whether it's kupuna, whether it's birthing mothers, that those people who might be considered most vulnerable are also the most precious, most important to assure that are supported. And so there was just a tremendous amount of synergy between the organizations that were created at that time. And I think that gives us a good model for how we need to work together going forward as well.
I want to come back to that synergy, and Kai kind of tease us a little bit about that. But before that, we get there. So what does Vaivai look like? I know you have overseers. You have the IRS. You have the probate court. You have the AG-appointed master. When they look at your returns, are they looking at Vaivai? Are you reporting Vaivai? Do they believe in Vaivai, or are they looking at economic returns? Are they looking at risk of holding lands, especially after Lahaina and the big settlement that was necessitated there?
It's two big things. to think about there come to mind. One is that there's this old narrative that I think is gaining some traction again, that lands that are not developed in a particular way are unproductive, that they're not being used to their highest and best value. And I think that's one that we have to challenge. There's, at Kamehameha, I think there was an old model that Uncle Neil knows far better than I, that sort of the endowment side of the organization was meant to generate money and then slip that money under the door. I think this is an analogy you've given. And then the education side does what it does. And what we're working toward really embodying now is that the endowment is roughly speaking 2/3 financial assets, 1/3 ʻāina endowment. And it's that 1/3 that there is a tremendous possibility to actually use and provide access to and put those lands to direct mission-driven impact. So it's not an indirect sort of generate funds so you can fund something else that's going on here in four-walled classrooms and campuses, but really as organizations like Pai Pai, I saw Kili'i in the back somewhere, have shown us that powerful education happens on ʻāina that cannot be replicated in school classrooms. And so we're trying to, grow what has been proven over the last generation of leaders. There he is, I see you in the back.
Mahalo. Keli'i, I called up Keli'i and Kanekoa Schultz of He'e after the big rains we had. I said, "Ai he kabaya kane." He said it was ripping, but this time your kupa never break. So the work that's being done is really demonstrating its wisdom. Kai, you want to jump in on this question? And we're going to come to the Public Land Trust a little bit later, but on the Aliʻi legacies and how we determine value and how do we connect people to ʻāina. You have some thoughts?
Yeah, I guess Prince Kuhio, he recognized the fact that it's not just about owning property. I mean, really is, land is identity. It's also, our health. It's our culture. It creates stability. And more importantly, when you put it all together, we're talking about nationhood. And so if we can all collectively work together and join, KS has over 360,000 acres. We have about 200,000. I don't know what OHA has. Queens or Liliuokalani has over 6,000 acres. All these different lands. And we're also in the process of acquiring new lands. I have a governor that's very supportive of the idea and recognizing the injustice that was done over 105 years ago by excluding all these good lands. So we're in the process of working with DLNR, the Department of Ag, HCDA, and others regarding the transfer of lands to enhance our development possibilities. Even working with OHA, they have lands. KS has a bunch of lands. We've acquired lands in Hawaii Kai, as well as across from Mo'iliili. We're building a 23-story high-rise. And, there's adjacent property. We have over 11,000 on our wait list just on this island. So we got to figure out, and we only have 4% of our inventory on this island, about a little over 8,000 acres. So we need to go with density to a certain extent, but more importantly, get lands. So the next 100 years, we'll be in a position to really, really address our waiting list, as well as the beneficiaries on the continent that we're trying to bring back. So again, it's a matter of recognizing the importance of the land and acquiring lands that are positioned such that it's more, I guess, not only marketable, but more of a creation of homesteads. We're also looking at areas like Miloli'i, Kahana Valley, Tantalus. We have Hawaiian communities over there. Why couldn't that be, rather than a DLNR leased land, homesteads? So we're going to meet with the different communities, see if they're up for that particular approach. If so, we'll move forward. We'll have DLNR transferred these various lands to the DHHL. We can then provide them with choices, loans to fix up their house, provide contractors OHA can step in and provide resources. Kamehameha can come in, develop educational centers. So it's an exciting time, but I think the recognition that land is so important is, without a doubt, something that we really have to address and position our lāhui to use the lands, but also control it. That's real key. I mean, we control a certain amount, but we should go after, like how the Indians have done, go after other lands. So we're looking to do that.
Well, you're talking about your one hanau, so I think you better let you in the room.
When Kamana gave his presentation, he provided a graphical depiction of really the Native Hawaiian culture, these very important values, pre-Western contact values, that I think really ground this conversation, because that's really what it's all about. It's what are our values, and how did our Aliʻi, who had the vision to create these trust organizations that were very mission driven. They provide the blueprint today for not only organizations like DHHL and OHA, but other Native Hawaiian serving organizations. And the values that each one of those entities drives their decision making is really important, because when culture is not just simply an overlay, or values are not simply just an overlay, they are literally the operating system for how we should operate. When decisions are made based on ike kupuna, when risk is managed in service of the lāhui, when values drives our decision making, then we really can put our efforts and our resources where they truly need to be. And I think what Kamehameha is doing and what OHA is doing and the other Aliʻi trusts are doing are trying to reorient those values and those investments to further the advancement of not just our lāhui, but all of Hawaii. So I think that's really important as well, Neil.
Mahalo. Kamana's slide had listed the missions of the various legacies, and it looks really discrete, like, okay, health services, Queens, education. And I remember the pressures of guarding against mission creep. Oh, don't do that. Housing is DHHL's job. Or health, well-being, leave that to Queens. So is that the way our Aliʻi thought? It almost looked like they weren't following personal passions. They were almost creating a legacy of different organizations that were fairly holistic in total, but only if they cooperate, only if they talk to each other, only if they collaborate. So what are we doing today to foster that greater collaboration? We saw it with Monsignor Kekumano, we saw it with Pinky Thompson, we saw it with Oz Stender. What are you guys doing about it?
Well, sure. So I look at it as this ecosystem of Native Hawaiian serving organizations, some of which have been in existence since our Aliʻi established these trusts. Others would come later. Nonprofits that are doing incredible work in our community all form this ecosystem that should work together and not remain in silos. And that's something that we consistently, try to overcome. But we are working together, and in many ways, the things that OHA is doing shapes the efforts of the other organizations. For example, the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. OHA's financial investment in the debt service obligation that DHHL has to open up more homesteading opportunities and to overcome the toughest obstacle to creating housing, which is infrastructure. OHA pays millions of dollars over a 30-year period for that debt service. And that's OHA working together with DHHL, not in a silo. When Kamehameha Schools has opportunities for OHA to partner with our Native Hawaiian focused charter schools, partly because of the lack of federal funding or the threat of the closure of the Department of Education and the potential reducing of those critical federal funds, OHA pluses up millions of dollars to the 17 recognized Hawaiian-focused charter schools across the state, giving them in this past budget cycle the highest amount of funding ever received by our Hawaiian-focused charter schools. Some of them the biggest in the state, Navahio Kalani Opu, for example, others all the way out in Kekaha at Kekula o Ni'ihau. And so we are working together, and but there's a lot more work clearly that we can do.
I can say that I'm really excited to see Department of Hawaiian Homelands creating housing on the marina in Mauna Lua and seeing homesteaders right there in Mauna Lua. For a recent partnership transaction that Kamehameha and DHHL partnered on. I'm not sure what our Aliʻi thought, but I can say what I think as someone holding responsibility in an Aliʻi trust at this time about the connection between housing specifically and education. There's a direct connection because if the campuses cannot recruit teachers who can afford to live on the islands where they're working, then how can we provide high quality education? And that's certainly the case on every island, but I think it's very, very apparent on Maui most acutely. So it's critical for us to be working with and supporting organizations like the Lahaina Community Land Trust and other housing-focused initiatives on Maui, because that campus in particular has, we've seen the ability to recruit and retain faculty and staff who can afford to live on Maui is very difficult. So I think Pauahi's will is very clear that she empowered the board to think about how to best provision the schools so that they can operate. And for me, I think housing and healthcare are critical aspects of that.
Ali?
Yeah, I think, when you talk about the collaboration with the Aliʻi Trust, as well as OHA and DHHL, this isn't new. I mean, you go back to, and you mentioned Monsignor Kekumano. I mean, he was a leader that came up with the idea of a multi-service center with all the Aliʻi Trusts, including OHA, which in 1998, many years ago, was built in Kalamaʻula on Molokai. So you had OHA with a district office, you had DHHL, you had a Kamehameha preschool, you had Alulike. And I got to give credit to Hanani Poliana that was kind of heading that up. We had, besides Monsignor Kekumano, we had Bob Oshiro with Queens. He was part of the group. Then we also had, Ostender as well as Ray Sun that kind of coordinated for DHHL. It's still there. It's still serving our Molokai community. But that was a collaboration that just set the precedent that we can use today. And we are doing it today. What do you call it? Kai mentioned the bond funding that they're financing, $3 million a year. But we started to think out of the box. I remember him calling me up and saying, we struck out at the legislature regarding Kakako Makai. Why don't you buy this? Give me $200 million, and it's yours. You can go play with the legislature. I said, OHA got to work with us. Let's work together. And so I said, let's go in. We'll do, and that's where the education comes in. I'm aware, and I know, I used to be the deputy AG for Hawaiian Homelands, that we have trust lands. When it's trust lands, because they were created prior to statehood, they're not subject to all these subsequent laws that are passed regarding zoning, restrictions, sort of like Kakako Makai. Those restrictions don't apply to our trust lands. So not only do we don't have to, be inhibited by the restrictions, but more importantly, we have the ability to issue our own permits. And so, collaboration with OHA, they're transferring 3.3 acres, Lot I, in Kakako Makai, and we're going to build a mixed-use high-rise, just like how we did in Moiliili. And with that, on top of it, we're going to put homesteads. We're going to make awards for homesteads. On the bottom, OHA will retain that area. They'll do the commercial, whatever else they want to do. But it's a collaboration acknowledging and asserting our sovereignty that is so important. But you wouldn't know that unless you studied the law. And I was fortunate to go to law school and actually do developments for the last 30 years. And so by asserting this particular right, this independence, we are able to move forward on that without any restrictions that the legislature can put on us. So it's really important that you educate yourselves. You know the law, so when you come to a situation, you can assert your rights. The Hawaiian communities, as well as different trusts, we have rights. OHA has certain rights. They have the ability to create OHA projects which are exempt from state, county, and municipal taxation. Just that right, when you do the numbers and the pro formas, it makes projects a hell of a lot more viable. And so we're looking at partnering with them. We've got a racetrack we're doing out in Kalailoa and some other things. So we're excited about doing these things, but also with the certainty that we have the rights that we can not only use our resources, but we can assert. So that's very important. We got to know and we got to be educated in order to do that. So I challenge you to learn the laws and then also come join us when we go to the legislature, because we're out over there trying to add our resources and rights. And so there's a bunch of things going on at the legislature that we'd like to share with you. We'd like this group to help lobby, not only be behind us, but OHA has some legislation that's also exciting.
I know you're anxious to jump in on this.
Yeah.
Let me just tee it up a little bit. We saw the lands of Makai in Kaka'ako given to OHA as part of a settlement process or partial settlement, valued at a higher best use, that then you were never able to execute. This is almost like people crossing names out, Liliuo's names out and writing any kind. What's happening in the system that's really kind of holding us back from achieving the justice that we're seeking?
One of the things Kali said is really important, and you need to understand that the Department of Hawaiian Homelands and the genius of Prince Kuhio in 1920 to author and pass as a territorial non-voting delegate in Congress, the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act of 1920, gives the Department of Hawaiian Homelands unique superpowers that supersede all federal and county laws, all state and county laws concerning zoning, building, housing. And so given the resources, and $600 million is a lot of resources that the legislature appropriated to DHHL a few years ago, DHHL has the capability to develop residential housing and not have to comply with state and county zoning laws. That is a major issue for us and the Office of Hawaiian Affairs in Kaka'ako, Makai, because we have 9 parcels that was conveyed to OHA in 2012 as a multi-million-dollar settlement for past due claims, public land trust claims that was never paid to OHA. The value of those lands was based on the fact that OHA would be able to develop residential housing in Kaka'ako, Makai. This would be between Restaurant Row and the old Fisherman's Wharf. So that entire block where the Burns School of Medicine is, Point Panic, the Children's Museum. OHA has been unable to develop any residential development in Kaka'ako, Makai since 2012 because of a state law that was passed in 2006 preventing residential development in that area. No one talks about it. But Kamehameha Schools, our Aliʻi trusts, have 4 major parcels in Kaka'ako, Makai, all along Ala Moana Boulevard. The value of their lands with that 2006 law was tremendously devalued. Today, 3 of those lots are car dealerships, and one of them is the Gold Bond building. But their ability to develop residential housing for Kanaka was taken away from them. The value of those properties were devalued. And so OHA is we cannot wait for the legislature. It's been 2012 since we received these lands. It's 2026. If there's one of the things that I'm committed to do as chairperson of the Board of Trustees of OHA is to develop residential housing in Kaka'ako, Makai for our people. And the Department of Hawaiian Homelands under Kali's leadership has the capability to do it. So although we are participating in the HCDA process to analyze the potential to do responsible development in Kaka'ako, Makai, responsible housing and economic opportunity, partnering with DHHL gives us that opportunity to finally bring that to fruition, because we do believe our Native Hawaiians should be able to live in an urban core. They should not have to commute 2 hours a day if they don't want to. They should be able to start their families and start their lives in the urban core where most of the economic and job opportunities are. And they should be able to do it in Kaka'ako and have the most amazing views in the world. And we're going to bring that to fruition.
Mahalo. Hey. Any more to add, Noi, Kali? Okay. Well, let's move on. There's lots of more to cover. So, the concept of ʻea keeps turning up, and part of it is at the leadership level, but part of that is at the community level. And we heard Kamana speak to that earlier about the need of our people to exercise that greater self-determination in a place like Miloli'i, or in Kaka'ako, or in some of these places. What are we doing to engage our maka'ainana to really be active, connected to lands? We've talked about Paepaeohea and the work that they're doing, and Kako'o and so forth. Are we seeing a movement there that's growing? And what's it saying about ʻāinahoʻi and the value of it, and what we can do if we have the opportunity? So you want to start, Kali?
Well, engaging the community is real key. I mean, we should lead with our beneficiaries. And so we've been active in, I guess the first project I worked on was the Nanakuli Village Center. With, I got a call after I didn't get reappointed by Governor Cayetano, because, he's telling me that, you're kind of acting like you're the governor. Well, I don't mind acting like the governor if it means moving our people forward. And so when I didn't get reappointed, I was approached by the leaders in Nanakuli, and they said, hey, we want to do this village center. So myself and various other partners that I brought in, we developed a center. And the whole idea was to empower the community. Not only did we need a center who could address the housing needs, we did a $14.5 million LIHTC rental project involving 48 units in the back, which, again, it was collaborating with people with the expertise. And that's real key, gang, partnerships. I didn't know how to do that kind of affordable housing development, so I brought in urban communities from the mainland, Doug Bigley and Tom Fisher, and they showed me how to do it. And I learned, and I've subsequently done a lot more projects using that approach. But it provided a solution to the overcrowded situation of the 1,050 homesteads we have in Nanakuli. You go to Nanakuli, and granted, it's one of the oldest homestead communities, but unfortunately, it's very overcrowded. Households, a lot of the homeless have abandoned because there's just not enough room in the household for them. So how do you address that? One of the ways was to create a housing project in the community. So we did that in the front area or the middle area. We worked with Kamehameha Schools. And I have to give credit to DJ Mailer and Jack Wong, because they approached Kamaki and said, we'd like to do this development. Originally, we were looking at a preschool, but they said, no, we want to do a cultural learning center. So that expanded. They put in $10 million. They helped with the infrastructure. And now we have a Kalani Ho'okaha cultural learning center there. And in the front, to address the health needs, we brought in Waianae Comp. They put a satellite clinic. We put Fresenius, a renal clinic there. And then, so the medical areas were addressed, or health. And then we also, from an economic development standpoint, we developed commercial centers. We brought in major tenants along with setting aside areas for some of the homesteaders to create enterprise opportunities. And so that collective effort was geared towards the coordination with the community and the beneficiaries. Since that time, we've also worked with other communities that want to take the lead. Kapolei, three of the homestead communities that put together the whole Maka Market Center. And then in Waimea, you have Mike Hodgson with his group putting in a similar. He kind of told me, I followed your precedent in Nanakuli. So they're putting together another village center in Waimea. So empowerment, as well as activity of our beneficiaries, and recognizing that they're able to do it if you give them a chance, is really important. That's what we're doing.
Mahalo. Noi? More to add? Okay.
Yeah, I think what I want to start with is, with respect to the question, I very much see myself as a maka'ainana, and I don't see a distinction, in the way that traditionally we had. But that said, I think it's the people on the ground who are working ʻāina every day who sit in air-conditioned boardrooms have to learn from, and not vice versa. I mean, there's obviously reciprocity in learning and sharing, but I'm very convinced by the work of Dr. Maya Safri, who is one of the co-founders of Kauluakalana in Kailua, who has talked about the importance for leaders to ike maka, and she writes about the stories of Queen Emma, journeying to Mauna Kea, and the importance of going and being in that space for herself. And I think that's equally important for those people who hold positions like ours, is to go to the places where decisions that get made in air-conditioned boardrooms, impact communities every day, and learn there. And I forgot the other part of the question, Uncle Neil, but
I think you nailed it.
Uncle Neil, I think one of the most important things that the Office of Hawaiian Affairs is doing is reconnecting lāhui to ʻāina, and doing it by including community and also lineal descendants. That's very important. And as an example, school children in East Hawaii on Moko Keawe come to our OHA's Wa'okele Opuna lands. OHA did not have land before, and this acquisition of land maybe started, in the last 2 decades or so. But today, OHA has thousands of acres of lands in its inventory, to almost 25,000 acres alone at Wa'okele Opuna on Hawaii Island. It's the 13th largest landowner in the state. The majority of our portfolio is legacy lands, ʻāina-based stewardship lands, but there is also a segment of our portfolio that is revenue-generating lands that are either today or in the future looked at for future development or transit-oriented development lands. But on Hawaii Island, keiki come to Wa'okele Opuna, where the native rainforest now becomes the classroom. And they learn about watershed protection and restoration. They learn about invasive species of Myconia and Albizia removal. They learn about iwi kupuna, because believe it or not, in Puna, there's a lot of iwi kupuna that are still there today and that remain in many caves that are protected and in some cases still accessible. And so what we are doing is really focused in our land division, which we've made some critical historic investments into resources and putting the right people in the right positions so that we can perpetuate our cultural and legacy and development land portfolio, and do that in a right way by including community. 2 places on this island, Kukaniloko is OHA lands, and we partner with the civic clubs in Wahiawa and Uncle Tom Lenchenko, who's like almost there every day, watering the plants there at Kukaniloko. If you've ever been to Waimea Falls Park, that's the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. From the waterfall and the pool that you can swim in all the way down to the bottom, that's OHA lands, and we have a nonprofit that runs Waimea Falls Park, and really this almost Mauka to Makai ecosystem that is developed there. And so, we encourage our kama'aina, our maka'aina na, our malahini to visit these places and to respect these places and learn from the lineal descendants and the community leaders like Uncle Tom and Wahiawa and on the North Shore that are there. And then at the same time, we continue to look at acquisition of new land. And whether it is through partnering with other governmental agencies or partnering with NGOs or nonprofits like a land trust, we consistently look at different lands that we can acquire and put into stewardship and put into protection.
I really appreciate you raising that issue, set of issues, because it's not just about what we get from the land, but what is our exchange? What is the reciprocity? So can you speak more about how are we creating a footprint or creating a landscape that's more lush, that's more abundant, more mona, more vai than when we got it? What's happening with all your respective agencies?
I'll address that by, I think the big question of our generation is how to steward these lands in a time of climate catastrophe, climate crisis. The Lahaina fires, Maui wildfires were one of them. Just a week or two ago, right, there are massive floodings in Ko'olau on this island and in other places. And one of the things I was sort of keeping my eye on is Kamehameha owns a large portion of Punalu'u and participated in a multi-year project to restore that watershed, basically to undo what a previous lessee had done in rerouting the stream and had caused major problems for flooding for homeowners below. And in that process also partnered with Huiku Mauliola to plant thousands and thousands of native plants in that ahupua'a. And I was pleased to see, I think, that there were no major issues with flooding, even though the videos that we saw of water just like running down in places like Waipau and He'eia. So I think what we see is that Ike Kupuna and following Ike Kupuna in today is a way to adapt and mitigate in a time of climate risk and climate crisis, climate catastrophe. And then the other place where I see that powerfully happening is in Lahaina, in the aftermath of the fires, and the way that Lahaina is leading and folks at the county level and in other organizations like ours are really committed to letting Lahaina lead, to envisioning what the revitalization in a post-plantation Maui Komohana is going to look like. And so at our board level, every single meeting, and we meet at least monthly, sometimes twice a month, we get an update on the Lahaina work streams every single month, which is part of the commitment to making sure that our teams understand that we're not leaving. Once the media cycle has shifted and, there's still so much work to be done in revitalizing and supporting that community and rebuilding. And so we want to keep our eyes always focused and committed to that partnership and to supporting Ko Lahaina when the cameras are long, long gone.
Hold on. Kali, you have more to add on this topic?
Yeah, regarding, malaming the ʻāina, but more importantly, preserving, as well as, for me, it's really being aggressive in taking steps to do things. I've been fortunate in that Neil, along with several of his people, have stepped up, brought in the private sector, SIGLO, with their expertise on core restoration, as well as watershed restoration. And so on the Big Island, we're working with SIGLO and through a nonprofit, Nakupa'a, but also working with Parker Ranch and KS that have a major presence on the Big Island. The majority of our land is over there, so we need to take care of it. We need to take aggressive steps to not only preserve it, but enhance it. We recently awarded some property, about 400 or 500 acres, right off of Mana Road, to the nonprofit to fence in, protect the existing core forests, as well as hopefully with its restoration, it'll bring in the water resources and rejuvenate the water system up there. But more importantly, we're also working with Parker Ranch. Micah Kane is a new head guy over there. And I trust that guy, and he's got this passion. He used to work at DHHL as well as KS. So he has an understanding of what we're trying to do. And he also has an understanding of the importance of collaborating and working together. So we collectively are going into the legislature to get funding to enhance the water resources, put the distribution lines, activate lands that have laid dormant for so long. And so by bringing in the water, we can restore and, more importantly, add to our homesteading program. But also working in a collaborative way because, Paca Ranch, they've been around over 100 years, and they know the cattle business. So with the new guy there, I feel very confident. He started up an internship program to teach our future ranchers how to, do the thing right, but more importantly, make it a business enterprise for them. So also with KS as well as Paca Ranch, if we collaborate and create continuous or the continuity between our different lands, we can better manage it. We can make it more productive. And so we're also looking at not only learning from that island, but using it statewide. Because we have other pastoral lands, as well as that's a major part of our wait list. And so we want to do it in a way that, it's not only for the particular island, but it's a statewide initiative. And so we're also looking at improving some of the resources on the different islands, West Kauai as well as Maui. We need to enhance, and working with Kamehameha on the Big Island, they've made a couple well sites available to us, so we can do maybe 4 projects that can now move forward because of that. So it's kind of working, checking out what the resources of all the Aliʻi trusts have, but more importantly, getting it done. And so we've entered into an MOA with KS and Paca Ranch to do that, to collaborate. We're looking at doing a timber industry, creating an industry. I mean, they have over 30,000 acres of forestry that is just sitting there. And so if we can not only convert that into blue lamb beams that we can use for the housing construction, that takes the costs of building houses down significantly. It assures a steady supply that we can use, but more importantly, it creates new homesteads at a cost that is affordable. So again, it's a matter of working together, and I thank Neil for taking the lead on suggesting the conservation of a particular area. I don't know if you want to get into that, Neil. I think you should.
I'd love to, but I'll tell you what, when Joe Williams comes on and gives his keynote, he's going to play a guitar that comes from wood harvested at Hononau. It's koa. And as a result of that harvest, the 1,700 acres from which we gather that wood is now fenced, animal-free, and growing. The seedlings now have a chance. And so there'll be a greater abundance in the future. And those are the kinds of models. But I really appreciate that Kale, when we were talking to him about this, said, I'm building all these Hawaiian homes and with lumber shipped in from Canada. Why aren't we supplying that from here? Why aren't those jobs of harvesting, milling, right here? Why can't the mana of the homes really come from what's coming from the land? So it's appreciate the leadership Kale's had there. Our time is about up, so I'm going to want to give each of you just one last opportunity to touch upon something that you feel may have been missed or needs to be emphasized. Kai, you start us.
For me, I just sort of added one more point to that, and I was thinking about OHA's role pertaining to your previous question. OHA, 2 primary missions that OHA has in its wheelhouse is we are not a direct service agency, so we provide grant funding to many nonprofits that do a lot of really good work in the community. The second thing we do is advocacy. And our team at OHA, every legislative session, is flagging every bill that is trying to dilute, circumvent, water down the laws and in some cases, the constitutional protections for our ʻāina and our wai. The lawyers that come out of Kahuliao that go into Kamehameha or go into OHA help us during the legislative session defend the current laws we have and preserve them, because every single year we are looking at laws that want to dilute, whether it's the powers of the Land Use Commission or year-over-year revocable permits for water use, extending leases on Mauna Kea, watering down iwi kupuna, regulations, circumventing Chapter 343 and the Hawaii Environmental Protection Act, limiting the power of community to have their voice at a contested case hearing in front of the land board. It's always a competing interest between ʻāina protection and development. And at the forefront of that is OHA's advocacy team. And so that's one of the things that I think we're really doing, and I just wanted to add to that. I'm going to take my 1 minute just to, well, first of all, mahalo, Kamana, for doing this, and thank you, Uncle Neil. I want to take advantage of the students that are here, if you don't mind. And I see students of Kamehameha here, and I also see, future graduates of the University of Hawaii here. The Office of Hawaiian Affairs is really here for you. Go and visit oha.org. Sign up just like you have for your Ho'oulu Hawaiian Data Registry with Kamehameha. Sign up for OHA's Hawaiian Registry Card Program. If you are a Kamehameha student that is a junior in high school this year, going to your senior year in high school next year, OHA has brought back Aha Opio this summer in June 2026, and you can apply for it now. 50 Native Hawaiian Kanaka from across the state, OHA will pay for them to come in and immerse them in civics education at the Hawaii State Capitol, almost a mini legislature. Bring in some of our, revered speakers and kupuna to spend a week with Native Hawaiian students, 50 of them here in Honolulu. And so go and take a look at, or at least share the opportunity for Aha Opio that has now returned to OHA. And then the second thing would be, if you are in your senior year at UH Manoa, or you're going to another university and you are on the verge of graduation, first of all, congratulations. Secondly, the Office of Hawaiian Affairs is funding 6 fully paid for 1-year Washington, D.C. fellowships for Native Hawaiian students. You can apply right now. We'll be selecting students in May, right after you graduate, to start 1 July. We'll place you in Washington, D.C. in one of the 4 congressional offices in Washington, or on some of the relevant committees that are there. And so an opportunity post-baccalaureate graduation to spend 1 year in Washington, D.C., and to bring that ike back to Hawaii should you decide to go pursue your JD or your master's degree. And so I just wanted to make that pitch, since we have students here that may be unaware of the programs that OHA has funded and is rolling out. But mahalo.
Mahalo, Kai. Noi?
Mahalo nui, Uncle Neil. Mahalo, Kamana and team for convening this awesome summit. I want to actually follow on Kai's trail and speak directly to students. And Kumu, as I mentioned, Kamehameha's endowment is, a third of the endowment is lands. We're moving in the coming year to this total gift model, right, of tuition provision for Haumana. And I know when I was a Haumana at Kamehameha, I had no idea what went on behind the curtain to make it possible for all of the amazing resources that we had available on campuses. So I want to put the invitation out to students here at Kamehameha, students at UH, and Kumu, if there are ways that you would like to access some of these lands so that you can learn about the legacy lands that exist, whether commercial in places like, Windward Mall, Kahala, Kaka'ako, and ag and conservation lands. Kamehameha in the last 4 years has also made 11,000 acres of acquisitions in Kaupo and Hamakualoa on Maui, in Ka'amola on Moloka'i, Kahuku Ranch in Ka'u on Hawaii Island. Many, many places to connect with. And I would absolutely love to give the next generation of folks the opportunity to understand what goes on behind the curtain that makes it possible for Kamehameha to do this total gift model of education. You are going to be, as Kai was saying earlier, our successors, and it's incumbent upon us, those of us who hold leadership positions, to be thinking about our successors and to actively be cultivating you and providing opportunities for you to take our seats, being more prepared than we are, more visionary, to be able to just accelerate and advance beyond what we can even imagine. So I want to just put that invitation out to those of you who are here.
Mahalo, Noi. Kali?
Yeah, I'd have to echo what the prior 2 speakers mentioned. The offer, we got offered too. we're looking for workers. You know, we got, especially on the legal side, we got 2 openings, and I hate to say it. I mean, maybe I'm too hard on them, but they seem to run away after I start banging on them. These deputy AGs. So we got 2 more openings. So any graduates that be interested, you know, please contact me. We also have, you know, different areas, you know, whether it's homesteading or development, engineering, you name it. It's a very diverse department in the areas that we are involved in. Economic development is another area that we're starting to take off. We're extending the TOD station to Kamehameha Aliʻi. So we're looking at, you know, the design of a new transit-oriented development site. We're looking at restoring the historic railroad lines that goes out to kuleana past Kahi. We recently awarded a 43-acre site at the Campbell where the developer is actually going to put in a movie studio. So we're working with, what's his name, Ellison from Lanai, that recently acquired Warner Brothers, I believe, or in the process. So there's going to be a lot of work, a lot of different things that we're trying to do, and become a part of that process, learn. And so not only as you develop your expertise, you can replicate whatever developments you do throughout the state. You know, I really just want to end by acknowledging, as well as I'm very excited in working with the different leaders from the different trusts. You know, with Luna Lilo, they have a great new executive director in Keola Dean, but I also see Sunshine Topping, as well as Eddie Antai, who's familiar with LIHTC. And so, you know, that expertise, again, expertise. In order to finance, you know, these kupuna housing, it takes money. But we have the land, so we're making land available to them in Kalamaula, you know, as well as Kapolei, Waianae Comp, adjacent properties. But to do the developments, it's really an understanding of how to do it. And fortunately, they have a new trustee that has that experience. You know, also with KS, you know, the Crystal Rose, excellent, very knowledgeable about development. You also have, you know, Noi and Michelle Kahane, who used to be a homesteader, so as well as Elliot Mills, Hawaiians. You know, big difference when you got Hawaiian leaders versus the turn of when we got statehood, where we had all these old haole guys running the, you know, the big 5. That's changed, gang. We got Hawaiians leading. So with the collaboration and asserting of our rights, even water rights. You know, the thing about DHHL, we might have these superpowers, but it also applies to water, the key to development. The law, the Constitution, as well as the statute, as well as the precedent, allows us to assert that. We haven't done it in the past, but it's a new game. So come join us and come help us. Aloha.
Mahalo, mahalo. Let me close. Kamana, thank you for organizing this Piʻo Summit. It's an amazing thing. Holomoa, keep going with this. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this wonderful panel. To the students, I know when Kamana and I were on the Water Commission, I think I would say 75 to 90% of the people who testified were Hawaiian, and many were Opio. And they turned the tide. Time after time, they made the difference in the vote. So that engagement is really valuable. The last thing I'll say is, having seen many waves of leadership at our Aliʻi legacies, the periods you got to really appreciate the periods where there's resonance. Feels like we have resonance with really great leaders. We got to ride this wave. It may not last forever, so we gotta get as much as we can, what we can. So mahalo to all of you for your service and your leadership. Mahalo to all of you.